Good morning. This is a Sunday School outline for July 18th, 2021. I'm titling today's lesson, Your Body, God's Temple. The lectionary readings for today are 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 14, Psalm 23, Psalm 89, 20 through 37, Jeremiah 23, 1 through 6, Mark 6, 30 through 34, and then again 53 through 56, and Ephesians 2, 11 through 22. Today's lectionary readings are thematically centered on Solomon's Temple. They delve into the concept of the Messiah, inclusiveness of the salvation of Christ, and the comfort of the 23rd Psalm. I wish to talk about the temple and just a little bit about sacrifice too, because that concept is closely tied to the concept of a temple. What I actually plan on reading is 2 Samuel 1, 11 through 13, Luke 11, 24 through 26, John 2, 21, 1 Corinthians 3, 17, 2 Corinthians 6, 16, Ephesians 2, 22, or Ephesians 2, 12 through 22, and Revelations 3, 20. So first let's delve into temples and sacrifice. Just what is a temple and what is sacrifice? Well, the idea of sacrifice is probably more basic than the idea of a temple to us, even though most of us don't give sacrifice much thought. At its most simple, and this is just my own ideas here, sacrifice is a way to seek balance and justice. Back in the good old days, people thought things like tornadoes, floods, pandemics, and other calamities were controlled by unseen intelligences. They used sacrifice as propitiation, a kind of a trade-off. If you kill a chicken, a cow, or somebody, maybe this trouble will stop. Well, eventually trouble stopped, because nothing is forever. So people thought the sacrifices worked. Well, once the people got the idea of those intelligences, they wanted to control them. So they invented temples for them to live in, and divine or holy places for the presences of those intelligences to be stronger. They also would create icons, images, and statues and stuff like that to represent those intelligences. People were afraid of gods, you see, both small and large. They couldn't see them, but they felt the effects when the gods were not happy. Then they created systems of beliefs about those intelligences, and they called those systems religions. And they created priests and ways for systematic abuse. I'm guessing that sacrifices tended to come from the less powerful sections of a society. So you need to sacrifice somebody, grab one of the poor people. Now, of course, we're beyond that. Or are we? Ask a football player who's ruined his body to provide entertainment for the masses. We still use the term sacrifice for that. So, now that I've wandered off the subject a bit, let's get back to the lectionary. David the king, in the 2 Samuel chapter, wanted to make his kingdom stronger by having a central temple for people to come to and worship at. All through the rest of history, by the way, the nation of Israel was continuing to struggle between the centralized system and local worshiping places. So, David tells his favorite prophet what he plans. And his favorite prophet says, yes, a temple as a civic project is a good idea. Then that prophet has a dream from God that basically puts a stop to David's plan. Here's what happened in that dream. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee an house. So God is telling David, through Nathan the prophet, I'm building you a house, not the other way around. And then, when thy days shall be fulfilled, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers. I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. Oh, and you won't build me a temple, but your kids will. He shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Oh, and that's short for it's going to change history. Now, the modern temple is people. You really should read the whole lectionary for yourself. You have the Bible and probably can get this stuff online if you don't, and see if you agree with anything I'm about to say. So let's jump from David's tabernacle and Solomon's temple to the New Testament. John 1:14 says, "And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." So here's a new concept, incarnation of the Word. Theologically, I think Word is the mind of God. In other words, Jesus is fully God and encapsulated that fullness in his physical body. Kind of hard to grasp, but we're talking about deity here, and face it, most teachers, when they don't understand something like I don't understand, they fall back on, hey, we're talking about God. However, it's a good idea to see what other folks are saying out there. Maybe someone explains it better than I do. Some of them, of course, you don't want to believe, but knowing what they're saying is always a fine thing. So let's go to John 2:21. But he spake of the temple of his body. He's talking about destruction of the temple, resurrection, that kind of thing. So because of this godness was in Jesus' body, he described this body as a temple. At least that's what John said after thinking about it for 20 or maybe 50 years. So let's pop over to 1 Corinthians 3:17. "If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple is holy, which temple you are." But Paul, who didn't know John that well, I don't think, takes the concept of a physical body and extending it to us as a temple. That's because Paul took all those promises of Jesus very literally. Those promises that when we believe Jesus, we become like Jesus. So our bodies are temples. And this verse has a big caution. Don't take care of this temple and God's going to destroy it. God is going to have some urban renewal on that temple. So that will have to hurt if that temple is your body, right? So be careful with what you do it. So 2 Corinthians 6:16, what does it say? "And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God hath said, I will dwell in them, and will walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." This is Paul again. In fact, Paul quotes Leviticus 26:12, almost word for word. He changes context just a bit, though, and transfers templeship from a tabernacle, then the temple, to people. Ephesians 2:12 through 22, this is almost all from the lectionary, "that at the time ye were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world." Now we're back to the lectionary, and I'm focusing on the parts that just might emphasize the universality of that templeship that I was talking about earlier. "But now in Christ Jesus, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Christ." So here Paul says there's not a gulf between previously holy folks and previously mundane folks. "For he," Jesus, "is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us." Okay, so we're back to temple language. Here Paul says there is not a gulf between the previously holy folks and previously mundane. I skip backwards. Jesus has destroyed the barriers. The temple in Jerusalem, and even most temples to other gods, had sections for those that really, really, really belonged, and the unholy masses. Paul says there is not a barrier anymore. The only unholy masses really, really, really belong with Jesus and God and all the holy stuff. I extend that to say that everybody is a temple of God. They just might not know it. Now, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself a twain one new man, so making peace, more of the same, we are all in this together, right? And that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby. And we'd better start getting along. And came and preached to you which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. And we have each a direct line to God, all of us. Anyone who tells you someone is closer to God than anybody else is just using their wrong words. Each of us has this direct line to God, but each of us has other stuff in our lives. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together grows unto an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit. The other stuff in our lives is highlighted by one of the teachings. Jesus says, what happens to someone who cleanses himself of all bad stuff? Here he talks about it. Luke 11:24 through 26. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, the unclean spirit does this, and seeketh rest, and finding none, he saith, I will return unto my house whence I came out. And when he comes, he finds it swept and garnished. Then goes he and takes him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man who had a swept and garnished house for a little while is worse than the first. So there's a danger. Basically, clean the house and figure out how to lock the door. Revelations 3:20 says, Behold, this is Jesus talking, Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. So let Jesus in. And there it is. Just dipping into the templeship of your body. Take care of it. It's God's house. If you screw it up, there is still hope and continued healing. That's talked about in a lot of other places in the Bible. But it's better if you don't screw up. Get Jesus inside of you, destructive forces outside or controlled, and it's a constant process. That's it for my outline. Have a good week, and let's see what happens. Thank you. Bye-bye.